One of the issues that comes up again and again in debates pertaining to veganism, debates pertaining to politics, feminism, anything else worth debating, really is how precisely we use language. The precision with which we use language to a large extent shapes our ability to discuss and dispute concepts in a way that is productive. It may seem like a needlessly verbose statement I just made, but the problem is when we use words in a way that's indistinct or unclear, we don't know what we're talking about. We don't know what we're winning or what we're losing in a debate in a real sense. So just now on the live stream, I was commenting about the word exploitation, and I have a real problem with the way people use exploitation. So even though I have had debates on my channel or discussions about how much I dislike Jeff Nelson and his content, and I dislike Nina and Randa and their content, I have never accused Jeff Nelson of exploiting his daughters. One reason I would not do that is that it's just so vague. What do we mean by the concept of exploitation in that context? Some people have recently been accusing me of exploiting someone else's name. I've actually had that recently, even on the videos about Game of Thrones, A Song of Ice and Fire. Oh, you're exploiting this other person by criticizing them in your video or something. Like, okay, what does exploitation mean? If my using the name of another person whom I'm critiquing or disagreeing with, if that's exploitation, we can't even debate it. It is simply too unclear. So one of the problems I have with what I'd call, warmed over Marxists, 21st century Marxists who after the collapse of the Soviet Union are still repping Marxism, is that they tend to lean so heavily on words that nobody can define and that they themselves do not use with any precision. Quite some time ago, I said that I would have a book review coming up for a book titled Animal Oppression and Human Violence by David A. Nibert. Or Nibert or Nibert? He's probably Nibert. I don't know. Look, guys, that book review is not going to be forthcoming. I tried to buy the book on paper. That didn't work out. If I owned the book on paper, I would probably force myself to read a larger percentage of it. Instead, I couldn't get it on paper. I ended up getting a copy as a PDF, or not even, whatever, an ebook. I got an electronic copy. And I got to tell you, from my perspective, this is really pretty terrible. The quality of writing, and again, just this one issue, the use of language, to me is intolerably bad. So I'm going to read you 5 sentences here, and you'll see what I'm talking about. So this is a section of his conclusion, basically, addressed to transcending the capitalist system. Now already, what does the word transcend mean in this context? I've had to talk about transcending things and transcendental experiences in the context of Buddhist philosophy. In the context of economics, what does transcend really mean? Why are you using a word that is so vague and misleading as transcend? It's probably because you don't want to use words like abolish or even revolution or something, which have a much more definite meaning. Anyway, so he's saying in his conclusion here, as we have seen, domesticration. So domesticration is the word he uses instead of domestication to make it clear that he disapproves of the domestication of animals. As we have seen, domesticration fueled the rise of capitalism, and many of its most deplorable colonial and imperialist practices have shaped the contemporary world. Today, he says, capitalism promotes domestication on an enormous level. Tens of billions of animals are tortured and brutally killed every year to produce growing profits for 21st century elites who hold investments in the corporate equivalents of Genghis Khan. These new Khans are the corporate persons whose ranks include Tyson Foods, ConAgra, Smithfield, Pilgrim's Pride, Cargill, Purdue Farms, Maple Leaf Foods, United Egg Producers, United Poultry Growers Association, etc., etc. So, I'm going to stop there, believe it or not. There are many, many things I dislike about the crypto-communist and Marxist approach to politics and life on Earth. Capitalism itself becomes meaningless if it's defined so vaguely, right? Capitalism has to mean something. Whatever capitalism is, it has to be contrasted to feudalism. It has to be contrasted to a pre-capitalist society. And then we can also contrast it to non-capitalist social systems such as communism. Now, all of the claims here, even in this very short couple of sentences I've just read, they're intentionally blurring those lines, right? What do you think? So domestication of animals, exploitation of domesticated animals, was that not a part of communism? Was that not a feature of communism? No, actually, it was just as bad under communism, in some ways even worse under communism. Exploitation of domesticated animals, was that not a feature of feudalism? Of the, traditional pre-capitalist economy before you have the distinctive elements of capitalism? No, it was a totally integral, ineluctable part of feudalism, whether you're talking about Europe or Asia, even talking about feudalism in Japan or something. Exploitation of domesticated animals was an absolutely integral part. And now thirdly, if you want to reproach these corporate leaders, so the executive director of Tyson Foods, they are in fact not in any way comparable to Genghis Khan. And I find this kind of verbiage, truly idiotic and misleading in a way that's not helpful to anyone. Genghis Khan, we have some quotations from him. Genghis Khan's political philosophy was one of actively pillaging people. I remember reading a quote from Genghis Khan that there is nothing more satisfying than to loot a man's valuables and to then make love to his wife. Genghis Khan had a very active philosophy of looting, enslaving, and raping. A rape on a scale that's now difficult to fathom, and we don't just have literary and historical sources describing the kind of mass rape that went on under his regime, or his regimes plural. We also have DNA evidence to prove it. He literally changed the face of Asia because he and his army raped such an enormous number of people, right? Now, again, from a classical Marxist, classical communist perspective, Genghis Khan is not a capitalist figure. He represents what's called primitive accumulation. Piracy, basically. It's piracy on land, right? This is raping and looting and pillaging. Now, the executive director of Tyson Foods does none of these things. And this is really worth appreciating because it explains why it is that we as a society are exactly so complacent. All right? So, he goes on to say, I'll read another sentence here. Quote, "They display a pathological, single-minded pursuit of profit that is often more subtle than, but certainly as violent, destructive, and ultimately deadly as the practices of the murderous Khans of Eurasia's past." So again, Genghis Khan is what he's alluding to here. Genghis Khan and his successors. No! If that were true, people would not be complacent. If the executive directors of Tyson Foods were enslaving people, were murdering people, enslaving their children, raping their women, stealing their valuables, people would not be complacent. People would be offended. In reality, these companies provide people with relatively well-paying jobs, or anyway, jobs that at least pay minimum wage, and health benefits, and a comfortable life, and that's why their employees make excuses for them. They're a part of our cushy, comfortable, bourgeois, decadent Western capitalist society. They're not in any way comparable to Genghis Khan. And if you, as a vegan, which is what this book is written, if you from a vegan perspective want to try to motivate people, try to stimulate people, galvanize people to be opposed to the corporate interests of Tyson Foods, etc., Cargill, etc., the companies that profit from that, you cannot possibly do it in this way. You cannot do it by claiming that capitalism is just as bad as feudalism, and that these corporations are just as bad as a murderous, raping, enslaving, pre-capitalist despotism. They're not. They're not despotic. I'm sorry. The American Soybean Association, which is in his list, the United Poultry Growers Association, these are not despotisms. These are not despotic institutions. They're not. And the reason why millions of people are happy with them is that they provide a service that people value in a service economy, right? So, now again, I've read so much left-wing propaganda my whole life. My first major university is political science, blah, blah, blah. I'm living in a communist country right now. I was looking at a book in Chinese on Marxist philosophy less than an hour ago. I'm probably going to buy a copy of that book so that I can practice the vocabulary used for debating Marxism in Chinese. Before I lived in Laos, Laos is also very much a communist country, etc., etc. Far left-wing politics and the way that these arguments are framed is something that's overly familiar to me, right? But I mean, what is the point? I mean, given this is a book by vegan for vegans, what is the point of framing this discourse as if our opponents, as if the people we're criticizing, as if the industry we want to transform is a pathological, murderous, despotic regime? Which is actually what he's saying, right? Now he goes on. I don't even want to read this. Okay, there are other. I'll read another sentence. This shows you how it just, as soon as you've adopted this mentality of trying to dramatize, of trying to demonize your opponents, trying to dehumanize the people who disagree with you, this is the direction it takes. This is not what I want. I don't want to dehumanize these people. I don't want to demonize them. I don't. It's counterproductive, all right? So he goes on to say, these and other actors in the animal industrial complex, including the World Bank, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, agricultural departments in major universities, the Chicago Board of Trade, innumerable advertising and marketing firms and related enterprises. They exert enormous economic, cultural, and political influence to promote the consumption of meat, dairy, eggs, and seafood in order to protect the interest of those who profit from it. Contemporary domination of the world by global capitalist elites is furthered by corporate-friendly so-called free trade agreements and the World Trade Organization, which has joined the World Bank, etc. So you can see this. It's not even conspiracy theory. It's just demonizing these people, right? And, I was talking to a vegan a few months ago. Her father is a member of this. So she's vegan. Her father makes his money every day out of this, animal exploiting industry. Whatever you want to call it, the meat packing industry, the slaughterhouse industry, etc., right? These are normal human beings. I have met and interviewed, former employees of slaughterhouses, and I have at least one video talking about that. I remember one video that talks at length about this conversation I had with the guy, and very often they're happy. Very often they think it's a good job working in a slaughterhouse. There are other people on YouTube you can see, former employees of slaughterhouses who became vegan and now regard what happened in slaughterhouse as very traumatic and evil. I can remember one video at least I did on that, where I have some clips from other people's YouTube pages showing them talking about their experience when they were working in the slaughterhouse. I understand that from a kind of hackneyed left-wing perspective, they think this is useful. They think that describing these people as psychopaths who are carrying out murderous and violent actions in the name of profit, the psychopathologization of people who happen to disagree, they think it's useful, and it's not. What's useful is recognizing their rationality, is recognizing their humanity, is recognizing these people are not psychopaths. They are normal. They just happen to disagree with you. They just happen to accept a set of cultural values you want to challenge. So now let's move this story forward and discuss how we as a movement are going to get organized to challenge those values. Saying that capitalism is equivalent to primitive accumulation, that it's equivalent to piracy, that it's equivalent to Genghis Khan murdering and enslaving and raping people is useless. I know why he's doing it. I know the ideological reason he's doing it. I know the whole 150 years of this kind of left-wing tradition. But it's not useful for communists. It's not useful for socialists, labor organizers, and it's definitely not useful for us as a would-be movement, veganism as starting off today. So guys, this is not a book review. I do not know. The next couple of months, will I have the time to sit back down with this book and devote more attention to it? It's very hard for me to imagine I do so. So this may be my announcement that I'm not going to review this book. I find it very, very difficult to read even one page of this book. From my perspective, it's extremely poorly written. It's extremely insincere. And the use it makes of left-wing political concepts is totally counterproductive from my perspective. It's not useful for veganism. It's not useful for left-wing politics, etc. But with all that having been said, I found out about this book in the first place because of a suggestion from one of my supporters on Patreon. Thank you for that. I am interested in any fresh philosophical or political perspective on veganism as a movement. And I do feel like in a sense that looking at this book has has enriched my engagement with veganism as a movement. Although for me, the enrichment is just another reminder of how hopeless and fucked up and pathetic the world of formal academia has been for animal rights, veganism, etc. To me, this is just another book where I look at it and think, wow, this is even worse than what we have going on YouTube. And I mean, if you think about it, it makes sense why. YouTube is really a very Socratic medium. People come on and make a video and they respond to criticism. It's this kind of perpetually open-ended dialogue. And what I see in this book is just the most ludicrous ego trip on the part of the author. He starts the book by wanting to show how the whole tradition of academic sociology is bad and evil and wrong because it treats domestication of animals as a good thing, as part of the positive progress of society. Okay, well, guess who your audience is? It's people like me. So, I don't know, you could cover that in about a paragraph, unless you're really interested in seeing this guy kick the can with the the godfathers of sociology as an academic discipline, which is of no use to anybody, and it's interesting to an incredibly small number of people in academia. I'm not even going to judge that part of the book, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. And then you get into this kind of, fanatical left-wing ideology. It just seems like pissing contest. Who can say the most outrageous thing to demonize people who happen to disagree with you? So I'll bring that back down to earth with one last comment. In the last couple of days, I have had some people disagreeing with me on the internet, which is great. You always should. I'm totally cool with people criticizing me. But when I'm actually sitting here willing to have a debate with them, I think they're so unfamiliar with what I've just been alluding to. They tell me I'm a sociopath. They tell me I'm a psychopath. They just scream insults at me. And I'm actually sitting here in live chat like, oh, okay, well, let's talk about it. What's your actual critique of my video, or what do you disagree with? And they can't do it. They can't offer a critique. They have no opinion. Their opinion is just to dehumanize me, to in an ad hominem way suggest that I'm a sociopath or a psychopath, which again is what this guy does, David Nibert. He does. He's saying that, the owners of Burger King are psychopaths, which I doubt. I doubt the owner of McDonald's, Wendy's, or Tyson Foods is a psychopath. I think the reality we need to face up to in veganism, these are normal people. They just happen to disagree with us. I think you have to, on a profound level, start from the assumption, start on the footing. These are normal people who just happen to disagree with me in a matter of opinion. And now think through, how are we going to have that disagreement? How are we going to disagree? How are we going to, express our contrasting opinions? The fact that other vegans so rarely are capable of even disagreeing with me, that's already a warning. And when I see this kind of holier-than-thou left-wing approach, again, this is the opposite of Socratic Method. This is just getting into assuming your opponent, assuming anyone who would dare to disagree with you is a terrible human being, and then let's fill up pages and pages with ranting about what terrible human beings they are and how inconceivable their view of the world is. As if our own parents didn't eat meat, as if our own grandparents didn't eat meat, as if we ourselves, in 99% of cases, didn't start out our lives eating meat and believing these cultural excuses. As if it's incomprehensible to us that only a psychopath could disagree with us as vegans. This is really a pretty dark road to take veganism down. And as I was just trying to say in closing this video, I think once you get on that road pretty quickly, you lose your capacity to recognize the rationality of the people you disagree with, and then you lose the capacity to have a productive disagreement with them. Hit me up.